Hey guys, this is Charles Yeager with Metal, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a 3D portrait collage animation using FreeForm Pro in After Effects. You can easily change the direction and animation style with just a few clicks once it's set up. Before we start, you can download the free project file for this tutorial on Metal's website. I'll have a link for that in the description. And you can always download a free trial of FreeForm Pro from aescripts.com. Alright guys, let's go ahead and jump over to After Effects. Alright guys, let's go ahead and create a new composition. This will be our main comp, so I'll just name it main comp. Have it be 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, and I'll have this be 10 seconds long. Go ahead and click OK. Now let's create a new solid to apply FreeForm Pro to. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to do a new solid. And with the solid we create here, I'm actually not going to have it be the comp size, I'm going to have it be perfectly square. So I'm just going to leave this at 960 by 960. It's just going to work with FreeForm Pro a little bit easier because we're going to be creating a square shape in the end, and so working with a square solid just works a lot better. And I'll just name this FreeForm Pro. And I'm going to change the color of this to be perfectly white just so it shows up a little bit easier as well. Click OK. Now with that selected, let's go ahead and apply Metal FreeForm Pro. And let's first navigate over to the primitives. I'm going to toggle this down, and we're going to have this be planes because the portraits are actually going to be projected on the planes. And right now we have so many shapes on here, it just still looks exactly the same. So let's go ahead and adjust the primitives grid on the X and Y. So I'll just change this to 6 and 6. So now we can kind of see a nice grid there we have set up. Now the end goal here is to have, again, each one of these be the portraits, the different images that we're going to be using. So let's go ahead and import in our images. So I'm going to go over to the project panel, and I'm just going to double click. And that's going to open up the import window, and you can see I've got a whole host of Adobe stock images here with different portraits on them. And I want to import this in as an image sequence. So I'm going to select the first one and just come down here and you're going to see importer JPEG sequence. Go ahead and check that on and select import. And we'll see that over here that it has imported those as a sequence, and we have 0 to 23, so there's 24 total different images here. And I want to make sure it has the same frame rate as our composition is, so I'm going to right click on that and come down here to interpret footage. We're going to select main, and then in here you can select assume this frame rate, so it's already set to 30 and that's what we want it to be, but if you want to change that you can. And you can also set it to loop multiple times if you want to do that as well. I'm just going to click OK. So let's drag these images, that image sequence, into our composition. I'll just place it below the freeform layer, and we can actually turn off the visibility for that. So let's go back over to FreeForm Pro, and let's go into the settings here. And let's go ahead and just navigate to the texture settings where you can see apply texture. And for the primitive texture layer, we can just go ahead and select that image sequence. And now we can see those images are being projected onto the planes here, but we're only seeing one currently. So let's go over to sampling. And I'm going to select interval still frame. So it is going to basically select different frames throughout. And we can actually adjust this so it will select each of our frames. So the number of samples, I want to set this to be 24. Because that's what I'm working with, so however many images you're working with, set that value to that. And then the way this image sequence works, if I go ahead and double click on it here, you can see each frame is a different image. So if I just set this interval to be 1, it'll basically take 1 from each frame, and those will all be different images, so it's a quick and easy way to do that. So under sampling here for the interval frames, I'll just set this to 1. Now you can see we have a wide variety of all the different images in our sequence. Now, the first thing we're going to notice here is that the aspect ratio is off because these are being projected onto perfectly square planes, and our actual image sequence here is more kind of like not quite 16 by 9, but we can see the size here is 512 by 400 on the actual size of those images. So let's go back over to our FreeForm Pro, and under the primitives here, we can adjust the X, Y, and Z scale here to match the images. So for Z, we'll just set this down to 1 because it doesn't have any actual depth to it. For the X scale, we'll type in 512. And for the Y, we'll type in 400. And now we can see the images are quite large and really too big for what we want to be working with. One easy solution you could do with something like this is just divide it, the X and the Y, by the same number. So if I go up here to 512 and I just type in divide by 4, we can hit that, and that brings us to 128, and then for 400, obviously that divided by 4 is going to be 100. So now we have the correct aspect ratio, but just smaller versions, so about a fourth the size. But you can see now everything's being projected correctly. And you can continue to resize this, again, just making sure that The ratio stays the same. I think in the original project I had this set on 140, and then for the Y scale was at 110. And that just bumps those up in size a little bit, but again, they have the same aspect ratio there. Another setting we can adjust here in the primitives is going to be the auto orientation. We want this to orient to camera. And since we're on that, let's go ahead and create a new camera. So I'm going to right click here for new camera. And I'm going to work with a 20mm preset camera here. Go ahead and click OK. And let's go back over to FreeForm Pro. Now it may not seem like it right now, but we are working in 3D space. So let's go over to the 3D transform. And you can see we have position and rotation here. So I'm going to rotate this a little bit on the X-axis. And now you can really start to see how these images are sitting in 3D space. And if we need to reposition this, we can. So if I want to move this a little further away from the camera so we can see all the images, and maybe move this up just a little bit because we have that kind of tilted at an angle. But we could quickly create a loop here with something like the rotation. So I like rotating the Z-axis here. You can see as this is done and all the images there on screen. I'm just going to move this up a little bit more. But you can see all the planes are kind of honoring their position in 3D space and not cutting each other off. So again, this is a really quick and easy way for us to kind of create something quite complicated with images, maybe like a commercial project using planes in FreeForm Pro. So let's go ahead and create a loop here with this. So I'm just going to set this back at 0 for the Z, do a keyframe. We'll just do a 5-second loop here so it's a little shorter. And I'll go ahead and set this to be 1 for the rotation, and we can just do a quick RAM preview of this, and we can see all the images rotating, and this will perfectly loop. Now what's also cool is we can rotate this on multiple axes. So I'll just go back here to the very beginning, and we can do the same thing with the Y axis. So I'll create a keyframe there, move back down here to the end, set this at 1 for a full rotation of that on the Y. And I'll just scroll through here with this, and you can see how much we've changed that up dynamically by rotating on multiple axes. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the rotation on the Y there. Leave that back at 0, just so we're working with the Z rotation here for this next demonstration. Let's go ahead and add in a light so we can work with some shadows and some light fall off. So I'm just going to right click here and do a new light. And I'm going to have this be a point light, and we'll just leave it all the settings at default. Make sure cast shadows is on though. Go ahead and click OK. Now we can see we're getting some nice lighting fall off here as well as some shadows. So I'm going to select that point light. I'm just going to move it kind of off to the side here, maybe back a little bit. But you can see if I zoom in here, we're getting some shadows right there. And it really, as is, default, they're completely black. And it almost looks like it's clipping or cutting into the image behind it. And so I think that's a little bit extreme. So I'm going to move this down a little bit more so we can kind of get those shadows up a little bit. So what I'm going to do here with this is select that light and just hit AA on the keyboard. That'll open up the light options. And what we need to change here is the shadow darkness. So by default, it's going to be 100%, so it's completely black. So let's drag this down, recommend something like 50 or 40%, somewhere in that range. And you can see it just kind of makes it a lot lighter, whereas we're getting that nice shadow on those images, but it's not so dark that it almost looks like it's clipping or cutting the images off. So that's helping sell that 3D, and again, we're getting some nice natural lighting fall off. You can see how that affects and reacts to the images here. Something else we can do is actually add in some fog, so it kind of affects the images further back in Z space. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come back to FreeForm Pro. Let's scroll down here to the bottom, and we're going to see environment, and we're going to have fog here. Let's go ahead and set the fog type to be smooth, and we may have the display grid pop up like it is here. If you don't want to turn that off, just come here to display grid and uncheck that, and that'll disable it. Now let's adjust the near and the far distance. So I'm just going to type in 1000 for the near, and then we'll type in 2000 for the far. And now we can see what's happening here. You can see the back images here, if I go ahead and bring this far in, are basically falling off into the fog. And we can kind of adjust the near and the far to get a nice balance there. So I'm going to push the far pretty far back there, somewhere in the 1000 to 2000 range. But again, if I check this on and off, we can see the difference that makes there. Basically drawing more attention to those in the front. And if we go ahead and scroll through this, you can see how it's impacting those that are further back. Now what's also cool is you can change the color of the fog. Let's say if you're working, with a colored motion graphic background. So I'll just go ahead and create a new solid here. Let's make this kind of a medium red color, make this comp size. just call this BG. Click OK, move this to the very back of everything. Now we can see our fog is black here, but if we come back over to our freeform layer, select the color picker, select that red. You can see it falls off more naturally kind of into this scene with whatever you're working with. And I can actually increase that if we want to. So it really clips it off there. So that's kind of a neat look how it really just fades all the way into that background. Now really quickly, I want to show you guys a few other ways you can add even more movement to whatever freeform image collage you're working with. So I'm going to come up here to the very top, and under editing controls, we have these things called auto tangents. Go ahead and check those down and check on enable. And it's going to allow us to adjust the midpoint biases in multiple different ways, and we can keyframe these as well. So I'm just going to adjust these. You can see what's happening. So you can see how this is kind of offsetting some of the middle rows, and we can keyframe these to have kind of a looping animation with them as well at the same time as this is rotating. And we can also do that with some of the endpoints, midpoints, and all sorts of other points with this. So you can really create some cool, complicated, loopable animations with all these freeform planes that we're projecting here in our scene. Also should note, because all these are orienting to the camera, if you ever wanted to actually animate the camera itself, we can just select our camera here. I'm gonna hit C on the keyboard, and I can just go ahead and create my own animation rotating around this, and it will be affected by the fog and the lighting and everything else we can see. We can also use a displacement map to kind of offset our images. So what I've got here is just a displacement composition, which has a white solid that's been feathered coming across this black background. So let's jump over to this composition. And again, this is included with the project file if you want to break this down even further and check out all the other ways you can displace things using freeform. But under the displacement mapping settings, we can select a displacement layer. So there's that layer that I set up there. And we can come through here. If we scroll through, we're going to see how it's actually displacing the images based off of that displacement layer. And we can also change the displacement height. So if you just want it to be really high or low, you can make those setting adjustments there as well. So you have several options for controlling animations like this with Freeform Pro. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. And don't forget, you can download that free project file from metal.com, and I'll see you guys on the next one.